Hello everyone, thank you for joining me today. I will be talking about what raising 3 kids has taught me about working with users. And sometimes users are irritating, annoying, troublesome, but without the users we have no point in our products, our sites that we're building. So I assume that's why you're all here, is to learn more about dealing with those relationships. So before I get started, I just want to mention that this is, I'd like to thank you for coming out, and this has been such a great conference. I've learned just as much as I've taught to people. There's so many great speakers, so many great attendees, so this has been really great. A little bit about myself. I'm a father of 3 kids. You kind of got that from the talk title. I volunteer with a nonprofit attorney group back home called Community Justice. I am a senior engineer at Turn2 Networks. I'll give you a little overview of that in just a second. And I love making pizzas at home with the family. So, okay. For those of you who don't know where Wisconsin is, where I'm from, here's a little map. It's in the north central Great Lakes region of the United States. A few things that we like in Wisconsin: we like our sports. We especially like American football. For the people outside of America, that's the football where we don't actually use our foot all that much on it. So unlike football in the rest of the world, which is primarily foot-based, this is our mascot from our local university, Bucky Badger. We get very excited. He's on t-shirts and hats and cheese and tortillas, and just pretty much everything has Bucky Badger on. And I think we share some similarities with the Netherlands because we really like beer and cheese. And sausages, actually. I didn't put that on there, but probably the 3 favorite things in our state. So just a brief mention of where I work, Turn2 Networks. We work on e-commerce sites. We do the ratings and reviews, question and answers, and all that kind of stuff. Right now, except for our plugins to Magento, a lot of our backend code is not in PHP, but we're processing lots and lots of data. So it's a very cool and up-and-coming company to work for. So to get started, these are my 3 kids, 16, 7, and 14. Actually, sorry, my son is 8. I know that, but the slide is the slide was made last year before his birthday. So, so this is my family, and this is the kind of communication that you have as a parent. You know, just this like tedious stuff. You know, making sure that they clean up and do the laundry and stuff like that. And what I've found is being a parent and then working with users and project requirements, you end up doing a lot of this same tedious types of communication. And I'm just going to kind of give you some strategies for how to manage that on your projects and in your teams. To get started, you have to think about who your users are. Generally speaking, our users are not us. If you make a product, like if you work for JetBrains, then your users are developers. However, most products out there aren't geared towards developers. And bridging that gulf between everybody in this room who really, really knows technology well, and your users who maybe they're forced to use technology because that's how they have to buy something. That's how they have to reserve their seat at the movie theater. But they're not necessarily don't have the same level of knowledge and love of technology that we do. So it's important to understand how that gulf can affect our communications. So in general, in my experience, you know, I've been talking with project stakeholders, you know, the customers of the business. Sometimes you're making an app for employees of the company, or if you're a consultant, maybe for clients. It doesn't matter. At some point, you need to understand what they're doing. And you're going to need to communicate the requirements. You're going to need to, the requirements, of course, is especially important. You're going to need to understand how the people use your app. This is incredibly important because if you don't understand how they're going to use it, your usability ideas might be different than theirs, especially if there's a big technological gulf between you and them. Another thing is getting a successful product launch. I've been on projects that we made a great product, and the users got a huge benefit out of it, but it was not well received. And the reason is that they didn't understand the whys. They didn't understand why this was being built for them. And we sort of understood why they needed it, but we didn't understand enough about why they needed it and how to communicate that. So we actually had this project that took a whole room this size filled with paper files, and we automated the whole process. And we thought, this is going to be great. There's no more people running around this big room, getting on ladders, trying to get files. Now they are working with scanning and really able to understand what's in those files and not spending so much time moving around. So we actually gave them a good product that could help them do their job a lot better. But there was a communication breakdown. And so what we heard a number of days for launch is, oh, as soon as this launches, we're all getting fired. And of course they didn't tell us that. There was like a rumor and everyone is like freaking out. And then eventually we heard it in like a stairwell that they were really worried about this. So we had to like kind of, settle them down. But if we had been able to communicate along the way, and so they understood that we're doing this not to replace them, we're doing this to help them be more efficient and to get a better work product at the end of the day. And that was our real goal, because they were making a lot of errors because they were rushed in the job that you needed a person for, and they were spending too much time just wandering around getting paper. So the first story that I'm going to talk about is actually a friend of mine's son. My friend's Mike. We've worked together for 18 years. And his son is named James, 7 years old. And Mike really liked making quiche for his family. He would bake a quiche, especially in the cold winters of Wisconsin. It was a nice dish to have. And once it got to be warmer weather, he stopped baking them for a while. And 7-year-olds, they don't have a really good memory and sense of time. Or I shouldn't say it's not really good. It's different from ours. They've only lived 7 years. A summer is a large portion of their lifespan. So at the next fall, Mike says to his family, "Oh, I'm going to make a quiche." His son James has a fit. James is like, "I hate quiche. I do not want quiche." And Mike is like, "Okay, fine, I'll make something else." And then he brings it up again. He's like, "Oh, James, how about we have some quiche?" No, he yells at it. And then after a month or so, he's like, "You know what? Forget him. I'm going to make it. He can either eat it or not, but I'm just going to make it because I want to make it. My daughter wants it. My wife wants it. I'm just going to not care." So he sits down at the table. They sit down at the table. He puts the quiche down in the middle. And as soon as James looks up and sees, he's like, "Oh, Dad, what's that?" He says, "Well, it's quiche." He's like, "Oh, that's what quiche is? Well, I love that." So, yeah, so it was just a complete misunderstanding. And I've seen that. This is exactly what I was talking about before, where you have to be on the same page with your users or your project stakeholders. One thing that I did for a project that there was a lot of specialized business terminology, and we wanted to make sure and it wasn't even consistent within the business units. They were using a lot of different terms interchangeably, and we were getting really confused. Okay, are we meeting their needs? Because we couldn't understand what they're saying. So we actually sat down with them. They actually started it, and then we sat down and refined it. We came up with a glossary, and we said, this is a company that makes the licensing exam for attorneys. And so we actually sat down and said, okay, when you say exam score, what you mean is the most recent score for that person who took the exam. Because exam score can mean a lot of different things, because we've got 100,000 scores a year, that kind of thing. So defining that was so crucial. And then in almost every meeting after that, we brought back out that glossary, because someone would veer off and say, okay, but what if when they give them their exam score, which one are we giving them? And like, nope, we've already defined that. And that glossary kind of started turning into our requirements, because we had this shared understanding of what does it mean when we create these things. And that was just so important. And I honestly think that given the personalities that were in there, the project would not have met their needs if we hadn't done something like that. Another thing you can, I think it's important to create like milestones that they understand. So when you say, okay, well, it's easy to say, sprint 1, sprint 4, things like that, and start using terminology. And it's fine to do stuff like that, but you've got to also like know the group that you're dealing with and kind of read the room, because I've been in places where I made sure that I don't use a single word from project management or agile. I was actually told once that saying out of scope hurt someone's feelings, so I wasn't allowed to say that. So and after I got done like ranting and raving about how ridiculous that was, I came back and I said, oh, we need to, I'm just going to use different terms. I didn't say sprint, I said 2 weeks of work. I didn't say, sprint review. I just said, product demo wrap up or something like, I just invented terms on my own that meant something to those people. And then all of a sudden, like the feedback just was all of a sudden great, because we took this thing that they were like, I was using all of these business words and they didn't know what I was talking about. Then all of a sudden, all I hear like the buzz around the office is like, wow, this project is going so well. We need to run more projects like this. We don't want to do agile or project management, but we need to do what Derek's doing. And a little did they know, those were the same thing, but we snuck that stuff in for them. So these stats are, from a few years ago, but just to give you an idea, okay, 105 billion people have lived on the earth since, that's an estimate. I don't know how many of the 1.7 billion websites out there that have been crawled are real websites and not just some bot or something like that, but 1 million apps in the App Store. How can what you're working on be special with all their stuff that's going out there? It's really easy to get overwhelmed. Now, does anyone in the room know Mr. Rogers? Okay, a few. He's a American public television actor for children. He had a show that ran for decades, and like every kid my age and older grew up watching it. That and Sesame Street were like the two core TV shows that every kid knows about in the United States. So, and one of the things he always said is, you are special. And when you're working on a project, you have to understand that, yeah, what you're working on, it can be special and meaningful, even if it seems like the most dull, boring topic that you're working on. Because even if it's boring or not holding your interest, you're probably going to be spending a lot of time on this product, and it's hopefully going to mean a lot to somebody who's using it. For example, if you're building like an intranet application that someone in an office is going to be using, they may have to sit at their desk for 8 hours a day using this app, doing data entry or something like that. And so what you're building is going to have a huge effect on their day-to-day life. Even if it's just, I shouldn't say just, but, a website out there for something leisure related. It's still going to have a large impact on someone's day-to-day life, hopefully. So another, I read this parenting magazine or article in the New York Times newspaper, and I thought I really liked this quote about always saying yes to your children. And the point was that you should say no every once in a while, or actually more than just once in a while, and it's good for them. And I think the article was based on, at least in the United States, I think a lot of parents are just kind of saying, yes. It's easier to just say yes and get your children to be quiet. However, this article was talking about how saying yes keeps them dependent on you, and they can then never truly be satisfied or happy with things if they're always just chasing the next thing and always getting what they want. And I've seen this in projects as well, where where someone, they're really strong-willed, and they say, okay, I need this. This is absolutely essential that this gets in there. And how do you know that the next thing that they want, 2 days later, is it then absolutely essential that you get in there? So working out, setting the boundaries and trying to find ways for them to help prioritize is extremely helpful. Some things that I've used in the past, one thing that we call a Moscow analysis, where we talk about must, should, could, and want. And the first time I did this with an incredibly difficult group of users, I was so happy because there was actually about 25% of their requirements in each of those categories. And that helped us so much because now we knew, okay, this app cannot release if we don't have all the must-haves done. It's probably not going to be a good app unless we get that next 25% that should be done. The rest of the 50%, those can wait till later, and then maybe they won't even be needed. And so but we let the users take the first stab at doing that. Then we had to refine it, of course, and we refined it. We do this multiple times through the project because needs can change depending on how long the project is. But this was such a good exercise for them to think and have to prioritize. You know, and there's obviously other tools to do that. You know, if you're in a more agile method, you might be, you know, talk about grooming the backlog, essentially just taking things that, you know, you've got this huge backlog of work and then sitting with your users and saying, do you really still need this? It's been sitting on our to-do list for a year. Is it still relevant? And just getting rid of all of that stuff that, because you're delivering good values, things of good value to them, maybe they don't need all those other features. And another thing about setting the boundaries with the users is I've worked in an office where it started out as a small office and then it grew to about 90 people. Not huge, but big enough that you didn't know everybody by their first name right away, and you couldn't like talk to everyone in the building. But when we started and then there were 10 people, you know, you could just sit and have informal chats. But because we grew organically like that, everyone had they just came to IT, to any developer, and sat down and started talking to them. And this is incredibly distracting when you're trying to work, because being a developer is creative. Even if it doesn't seem like being creative sometimes, you are creating something, and to continually get interrupted, it just you lose your chain of thought, and it's just so hard to get back into it. So we actually set up, in different projects, I've set up like different ways to minimize the distractions. I've seen people have office hours so that, you know, stakeholders and customer support can only talk to them between 10 and noon. You know, I've seen other ones where, you know, you have a designated person who is like on call and they can talk to just that one person, and we rotate it every 2 weeks. That way no one gets burned out having to do that all the time. But that way only one person is distracted and the rest of the people can keep going. So there's a lot of different ways to get at that. And when you're setting these boundaries, trying to keep the users out of the nitty-gritty details of the technology is so important. I mean, it depends on what you're building, of course, but in my case, it's been so important. We actually had a COO of our company get an account in Jira and start like looking at all the tasks. This was the biggest productivity killer I've ever seen, because all of a sudden the COO is saying, well, why is Derek working on this? Why isn't Derek working on that? And, you know, my boss would then have to explain, well, Derek knows databases better than Mike, and Mike knows JavaScript better than Derek, so that's why they're doing that. So he kept having, but, you know, it was every hour she would be asking, you know, question after question. So we shut that down really quickly, and then just kind of came up with some high-level reports that we're able to, she can see the high level of what we're doing, but she doesn't need to be, you know, micromanaging us that way. So something in parenting that you see a lot is the talk about fairness. You know, kids a lot of times say, it's not fair. And being fair and equal aren't the same thing. And this is, I've seen this in businesses as well. They want technology to be giving equal time to each person or each department or each feature. And there are some things that are just more important, or not necessarily more important, but you might be able to do something very quickly that's going to have a huge impact on this other person. you might have to spend 4 weeks to work on something that gives impact to the second person. That doesn't mean that what you've given them isn't fair. You've given them what they need, and getting them what they need is important. And that's kind of why, going back to a lot of those analysis tricks, trying to figure out what they really need is so important, and getting that to them. Another thing too is part of that fairness is making them feel that they are heard when they're talking to you, because if they understand that you heard them, but you can't deliver that feature right now because you just gave them this other feature, and that's enough to get them going until you can get to the next thing. Sometimes just being able to talk to you about that and understand that can offset a lot of issues later down the road. So there's a saying, there are no stupid questions. And then when you're a parent and you're going on a car trip, in the United States at least, you hear kids saying, "Are we there yet?" And this can be kind of a stupid question, or you might think it is. It's actually not, I would say, the first time they ask it, because they're in the back seat. How do they know if we're there yet? I mean, other than getting out of the car, they don't know how far you've been. I actually, one time when my oldest daughter, who's now 16, when she was 5, we were just talking about going to Grandma's house. We were going to take this big trip to Grandma's house. Grandma lives, kind of in the woods over here, which is takes 3 hours for us to drive in the car. The day before we went to Grandma's house, we went shopping, parked in this parking garage. It took us 10 minutes to get there. She, being a 5-year-old just strapped in the back of the car, she didn't know that we weren't going to Grandma's house. So even though we ended up in this parking garage, she started crying when we were there because Grandma wasn't there to meet us. To a parent and to a driver, I totally understood. Of course we're not going to Grandma's house, because I was in the know. But to her, she was like, I don't know, where we're going. So getting kids to, and your project users to understand, having realistic expectations about where are you going and what is your progress, it's going to help them feel better about it and avoid that, wait, why are we here? I thought we were going here. Some of the things that I've used to help my users focus on their progress, some of the basic tools, like a product backlog, sprint planning and review. So every week, at the end of every sprint, just kind of going through, okay, what have we done? What are we going to do next? It's important to do that with the development team, but also important to do that with some sort of stakeholders so that they see that progress. Burn down or burn up charts. I have I'm agnostic. I don't really have favorites on a lot of these. I think use whatever is useful to you, whether or not you want to, count down features that you're working on or count up to how many you've done. Again, you've just got to sense what works for your company and your users. The Kanban boards where you've got a lot of Post-it notes, having a good product roadmap so that the users can see, okay, we've hit this milestone, now we know what's coming up. Anything like that is just so important for your users, because you're going to get away from that perceived failure when you end up in the parking garage and they thought they were going to, end up at Grandma's house. So this is just an example of one project I was working on, and I was actually amazed at how much feedback I got just by doing this. It was very simple. We didn't, we're not using some complicated or really cool software as a service or Jira or anything like that, electronic. We just had the Post-it notes and we were moving them from left to right. But it was amazing how many people came in and said, "Wow, you guys are getting a lot done. You've got," well, first they said, "Wow, you guys have got a lot to do." Before this, they kept saying, "What are you guys doing in there all day?" Like, just, hanging out, playing games, and nothing serious. And then when they saw this, they're like, it just quantified it for them. they had no idea what was on these Post-it notes, whether these were day-long tasks, week-long tasks. It didn't matter to them. And then as the project went on, I think this project lasted 9 months for the build, and they, and then they were seeing these, moving from left to right. And it gave them a sense of security because they could see, oh, I don't understand exactly what they're building and when and why, but something's getting done. And they just felt good about that. Because before they were seeing stuff like that, we were just constantly getting questions. Have you done this? Have you done that? And I'd have to explain. Okay, well that's slotted to work on it in 6 weeks because we have to do this first. And we were just spending so much time explaining that, and then just giving them something visual to look at was huge. And it doesn't have to be complicated. I created this chart in like 3 minutes right before this talk, just as an example of something. And I purposely kept the numbers off the left side because I didn't want them to assign meaning to what we're doing. Depending on your organization, maybe you do need to put it in user stories or go a little bit more formal. But in a lot of cases, you don't really need to know. They just need to see, okay, well, we started out with a lot of work to do, and 9 sprints later, we're really whittling that down. Another thing that you've seen is in projects where people just keep adding on feature after feature after feature. All of a sudden, you see this growing because, they're like, oh wait, we started out with 40 requests and now we've got 120. Like, aren't you guys doing anything? And we're like, oh well, you guys are doing too much, giving us too much to do. So just having these quick visuals, especially for the higher up executives. One department manager, she would just I asked her if she wanted to come to the meetings and see what we're doing. She's like, no, is everything okay? And I said yes. And that's all she needed to know. She's like, is anything getting in your way? And I was like, wow, this is good management. All she cared is, are we moving along? And of course, this came with working for her for over 10 years, and she trusted me. So she knew that when I said, yes, it's on track, that's all she needed to know. And then she was hearing from other people, oh, well, they've got these cool charts, and we see that things are moving. And then she's like, okay, I'm going to stay out of your hair. And that was really good because she's the kind of person that was just so micromanagement oriented. I did not want her in there. So, yes. So this reference is a little bit dated, and it's also, I don't know, it might have a play in Europe too. But for a while here, my daughter was really obsessed with someone had a main character called Harry. And a lot of people think Harry Potter right away. But there was actually another boy named Liam and Louis and Zane and Niall. And it's funny, the first time I gave this talk, oh yeah, and for those of you who don't know, this was the boy band One Direction. Yes, yes. So, and the first time I gave this talk, nobody said like, oh, until even when I got here, they're like, wait, who's that? And I hear someone whisper, I think he's talking about music, But one thing that I saw from my daughter and her friends, and just kind of like the online communities about these bands, they had all these like exclusionary terms that they were using. They were, if you were a fan of Taylor Swift, you were a Swiftie, and if you were a Beliebers like Justin Bieber, and I don't know, there were code names for people who were true fans and not true fans, and I don't even keep it straight, but there were just all these terminologies that were meant to, like, if you didn't know it, you weren't in the know, kind of a exclusionary thing. And technology can inadvertently be that at times. This is a direct quote from an email I got after a project meeting. He says, I want to clarify some of what I was trying to explain at today's meeting. Since I don't have a technical background, it doesn't always make it from my brain to my mouth in one piece while under pressure. I had no idea that he was under pressure. This was a meeting of 4 people. We were just sitting around a little table. It was really casual. At least that's what I thought. But then again, I totally understood all the technology, and I'd been working for the company for 15 years, so I knew everybody there. He was younger and newer, and obviously not very tech savvy. I had no idea at the time, even from what he said, because it sounded reasonable. But just hearing this later, I was like, oh, I need to change the way we're talking in that meeting, because there's just way too much tech talk going in there. and he was feeling, like left out and afraid of what's going on. So just realizing, where your users are coming from is really important. Another thing that's difficult for users and for kids is changes. This is a couch in my living room. I'm not just, bragging about my living room or anything, but the reason I have this up here is when we first got this couch, my daughter did not like it. She found like 10 different things to complain about during the couch. And we're like, why? It's nice. Like, the old one was like kind of like, it had stains on it and it was like not comfortable to sit on. And, she's like, no, you replace this. And then one night when talking to her, I realized her real problem with it was that she said, you went off and made the decision, and I was with my brother and sister, and I didn't get involved in that. At that point, I understood it's not the couch, and she really likes the couch now. I think it's very comfortable. She just felt left out of that process. And that's another thing that can happen with users so much too. This is what my 7-year-old says, or at the time he was 7, now 8-year-old, says he's flat out, I don't like it when things change. A lot of users are that way too. I mean, because I think it's crucial not to underestimate what changes are going to mean to the people that are using your product. In technology, we talk a lot about being disruptive and coming up with disruptive technologies, which may be a good thing, maybe not be. I won't debate that. But for the average user, for the average person, you don't want your life disrupted. You don't want your phone disrupted. You don't want the websites you use every day for work disrupted. So you need to understand if you're getting something new, things are changing, understanding why is so important. And there's a lot of different strategies for helping people understand what they're getting out of the website. It's a lot easier if you actually get to talk to the people and get some feedback. If you are just dealing with users who only interact through your website, you're going to have to come up with different ways for them to understand, what's coming and why, and to do it in a it's going to be a little intrusive, but not in a totally intrusive thing where they have to, go through a 10-minute demo just to get to the product and all they want to do is, buy the same thing that they bought yesterday. So, you're going to have to take different strategies based on your user group, but getting an understanding of what this change means to them, because like I said, if there's something they're using, every day or, using for their job, this is going to have a huge impact on them, probably a bigger impact on them than it did on you when you're building it, because you can move on and go to the next thing or go into maintenance mode or whatever. So just understanding that, I think, is crucial to having a successful product. So kids and users also do things that are unexpected sometimes. This was when my son was 6. We were in the north woods of Wisconsin. We're having a picnic outside at some picnic tables. And it was starting to get evening, and a lot of mosquitoes were coming out. And in this part of Wisconsin, the mosquitoes get really big in the summer, and it's really annoying. So my son said, okay, I want to put on some bug spray. And usually he was at the age where he's just starting to, do stuff like that for himself. Usually we did it for him. So I said, okay, well, I was eating dinner and everyone else was, and he wanted to go play. So I said, okay, you can go ahead and do it. And I'm watching him, and he's spraying, spraying his legs, spraying his arms. I'm like, okay, he did it successfully. I turned back. The next thing I know, he's screaming. What did he do? He's like, there's mosquitoes on my face, and squirts it in his eyes. This was something I never thought to say, don't spray this in your eyes, because that never occurred to me that that's something that would happen. But, users of our products can sometimes do what seems like spraying bug spray in their eyes with our products. We actually had one worker at our office. She was great for user acceptance testing, because I don't know why, but she would always do the most bizarre things that you would never think of. And we're like, why would anybody think of doing that this way? But she was great to test stuff because all of a sudden, we're like, oh, okay, well, she managed to found a way to break our app. So, and then, go down and deep and understand why. But, we could have 1,000 other users test it and they would be, oh, this works great. And then she would just be like, well, why doesn't it do this? And then like in 3 seconds, it's like crashed. I'm like, I don't know how you did that. But, getting ways to get your users involved with the testing is going to be really important. Like I said, if you're in an office and you're dealing with people you get to talk to, it's a lot easier. But, strategies like A/B testing, or, where you're just rolling it out to, or if you want to just roll it out to like a very small, like, beta set. One thing that we do at my office right now is we roll out new features to certain clients at certain times. So Nike isn't going to get our first set of features. It's going to be, horsesupplies.com or something like that, where it's a much smaller site. And we also pick people who they're happy to get new features and they want to, beta test with us and they give us good feedback. So we pick the people who have, a good selection of users that can get us good feedback, and then kind of roll those things out incrementally. And then when we rolled it out to a few of those, clients that give us good feedback, then we roll it out everywhere. And you catch a lot of like weird stuff from, from just having people use your product out there in the real world. So there's a lot of, I found a number of articles about the importance of putting your kids to work. A lot of it was talking about how important it is for them to have summer jobs and just how that's a good growing experience for them, not just sitting at home, but actually going out and earning money. But I think getting them involved in the chores is very important too. This little picture here is just all the plastic cups my kids, when they were littler, used in one day when I unloaded the dishwasher. I have no idea how 3 kids, used that. Basically, they were single service, I guess, and they drink, or they wouldn't put it in the dishwasher, throw it in the sink, and then I'd load it in the dishwasher. But after a while, I realized, well, no, they can do this thing. I need to teach them. My job as a parent is to teach them how to, take care of themselves. And then they start seeing, how much work there is to do and feeling better about, kind of like the family as a team. When my oldest daughter, she's driving now, and one of the first things she said was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much time, like, driving is kind of a pain with all the traffic. Like, I really appreciate all of the times you drove me places, and, just to see that, because she's on the other side of it. But I think that, if possible, giving tasks to your users or your stakeholders or whoever, you're working on the project with is really important. One example of this is instead of just, taking a list of, okay, these are the things you want to have show up on the website, or these are the things that are going to show up in this like drop down, or, as far as these configuration parameters, we just got a quick and dirty interface so that they could enter those for us. And then as soon as they started entering that text themselves, they not only were they were feeling involved in the project, and not only that, they were starting to discuss things and leave us out of those discussions, because we didn't care what text they put for these labels and stuff like that. But when they were able to get involved and work on that on their own, they had a stake in this. So all of a sudden, we were building something together, and we had a shared goal. And we weren't just, because before that, we got a lot of, that whole phrase I mentioned before. Well, what is IT doing? What is the dev team doing? Why is it taking them so long? According to ads on TV, you can have a website up in 30 seconds. Why aren't they, why aren't they doing this? Servers just run. They don't need anybody to do it. I mean, at least that's what Microsoft told us on the ads. So why, why do we, why don't we have these products just like being churned out? But then when we got them involved and they said, okay, this isn't even technical stuff. This is like design items and, dealing with content. And when they got involved, and they're like, it's another one of those, aha moments where they saw all of a sudden there's a lot to this product, and there's a lot going on here, and they understood that, and we were all suddenly on the same team. So, well, being a parent can be rewarding, of course, but you know, you can also get a lot of thanks from your user team, especially when you know you feel like you've built a product together and everybody's happy, or maybe not everybody, but you know, a good portion of everyone is happy with the result. You know, you can get a lot of good feedback too. So, one last picture of my family. This is where the Milwaukee Brewers play in Miller Park in Wisconsin. So, I'd like to thank you, and I'd love to get your feedback on Joined In or via Twitter. Okay, well, thank you, and thanks for a great conference.